Imagine the sting of being invisible to those who should see you most clearly. In the quiet solitude of a Sunday in early spring, Avania's heart sank as she drove past her family home, a place that once symbolized warmth and belonging. There balloons danced in the gentle breeze, cars lined the street, and a banner professionally printed declared a celebration. Celebrating our pillar, Callista's 10 years leading Bundy Freight. Callista, not their parents, not the family, just her. Avania parked a couple of houses down, the weight of her solitude pressing down like the Texas heat. She sat still, the engine idling, as a whirlwind of emotions swirled within her. Was it the lack of an invitation that hurt more, or the unsettling realization that she wasn't surprised by their exclusion? She pondered, as many do in moments of betrayal, on the choices between justice and peace. Ever been betrayed by the people you love the most? A question that resonates deep within, stirring the soul with its profound simplicity. Avania drove away before her presence could be noted, her mind a tumult of memories and missed connections. Back at her own sanctuary, she unearthed a plastic bin of old keepsakes. Amidst yellowed report cards and faded ticket stubs, her fingers brushed against a silver hairpin engraved with a single letter, E. This was no ordinary trinket. It was a gift from her mother, a symbol of love that seemed to mock her current reality. As she held the pin, the cold metal against her warm skin, she reflected on her life. Growing up, she believed in the balance of hard work being recognized, in the notion that persistence would carve her a place in the family's heart. But now being invisible wasn't just a fleeting moment. It felt deliberate, a cruel twist of fate. The hairpin, a relic of better times, now seemed to question, what happened to us? On that fateful 16th birthday, my mother had handed me a delicate necklace, her voice trembling with emotion as she whispered, "As long as you wear it, I'll always see you as strong." At that moment, her words enveloped me like a warm embrace, making me feel as if I was truly seen, truly valued. But now, years later, doubts had begun to cloud that certainty. With a heavy heart, I tucked the necklace back into its soft velvet pouch and hid it beneath a pile of winter sweaters, not yet ready to confront the decisions that loomed before me. That evening, while the aroma of reheating chili filled the air, my phone jolted to life with an unfamiliar number. I was tempted to ignore it, let the call slip into the abyss of voicemail, but an inexplicable urge urged me to answer. "Hello, this is Gerald Hellbrook." A male voice introduced himself. "I was your parents' estate attorney. I apologize for the sudden call, but I've been trying to reach you regarding the trust transition paperwork. It seems you never returned your copy." Confusion washed over me. "What paperwork?" I asked, my voice tinged with bewilderment. There was a brief pause on the line. "It was sent 3 months ago by certified mail to your apartment in Garland." "I never received anything," I replied, my mind racing with questions. "Would you have a moment to meet in person?" he suggested, his tone carrying a note of urgency. "I think we need to review a few things together." The following morning, I found myself at the post office, the clerk's fingers tapping away on the keyboard as she checked the forwarding history of my mailbox. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice apologetic. "It appears your name was temporarily removed from the address due to a change of service form digitally signed by your sister." I stood there, struck silent, only nodding as I turned to leave, the noise of the world around me fading into a distant hum. By noon, I was at Mr. Hellbrook's office, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. He greeted me with a cautious look, leading me to a secluded conference room where the blinds were half drawn, casting a dim, secretive light. "I want to be clear," he started, his voice measured and solemn. "What I'm about to show you reflects your parents' most recent instructions, and it might come as quite a surprise." He laid a copy of the document before me, the weight of its implications already palpable in the air. The reality of the documents on the table was stark and unyielding, the signatures real and binding, the notary seal a silent sentinel of legality. My parents had transferred every piece of our family's legacy land property and company shares to Callista. All of it. I whispered, my voice barely a breath in the heavy air of the room. Mr. Hellbrook, sensing the gravity of the moment, spoke with a gentleness that belied the harshness of the truth. "I know this is difficult," he said, his voice a soothing balm, "but I thought you'd seen this before." My head shook slowly, a silent testament to my ignorance. Mr. Hellbrook, in the older version, was I included? He nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and confusion. "Yes, as co-beneficiary. That version is still in our records. Unless they formally revoked it, it should still." His words trailed off as he stood his movements deliberate and walked to his safe. From within, he retrieved a cream envelope thick and sealed with a golden sticker. This, he presented it to me, was meant for you. It's dated 6 months before the new documents. Your parents brought it here themselves. I stared at the envelope, my hands suddenly icy, as if the warmth of the room had fled. Why didn't I ever get this? My voice was a mix of accusation and desperation. He sighed a sound heavy with regret. Your sister picked it up the day you were supposed to. She said she'd deliver it. Of course she did. The seal broke with a slow, mournful rip, and I unfolded the letter inside. My eyes caught the first line, and my stomach plummeted. The air seemed to thin as I held my breath, the page trembling in my hand. This letter was more than just a sentimental note. It was a legal document. A notarized copy of the original trust, clear as the morning sky, named me as a 50% co-owner of our parents' real estate and their retirement fund, dated 14 months ago. My mother's signature, my father's too, and in the margin, a neat sticky note in Mr. Halbrook's handwriting. Copy retained. I sat in stunned silence, the weight of betrayal and revelation pressing down on me as Mr. Halbrook quietly stood, giving me space to absorb the enormity of what I had just learned. 14 months ago, before Callista had returned, before the world I knew had shifted on its axis. In the wake of her second divorce, the house felt like a mausoleum of memories, each room echoing with the laughter and disputes of days gone by. Before the abrupt cessation of our weekly family gatherings, I had begun to wonder if I was being edged out or if my presence had simply begun to wane of its own accord. Mr. Halbrook, ever the gentle soul, placed a glass of water beside me, his eyes soft with understanding. Take it home, Avania, he murmured, and don't rush to respond. Let yourself process first. My gratitude was a whisper, the words barely forming amidst the storm of my emotions. As I drove home, the letter lay on the passenger seat, an unwelcome passenger, its presence as heavy as the burden it carried. My fingers twitched, longing to call someone, anyone. But who my parents? My sister. The very thought made my heart race with an unspoken scream not yet ready to be voiced. Back at home, I perched on the edge of my couch, the letter still clutched in my hand, and did something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I cried. Not the tears of a shattered heart, but a cold, hollow cry that comes with the realization that something wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a deliberate strategy, one in which I had no say. In the midst of my tears, I began to scribble numbers on a notepad. I had been the one shouldering the financial burdens after the market crash, contributing to the second mortgage, the emergency plumbing, the new roof, and the unexpected property tax bill of 2020. Over 6 years, I had funneled $78, $300 into the family's coffers, each payment labeled by my mother as a family favor. Yet these favors, it seemed, did not warrant a place at the family table. Later, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows, I drove to my dad's mechanic shop. The place was a time capsule, unchanged in its corrugated metal exterior and the squeaky front doorbell. I hadn't stepped foot in there for months. Dad, sitting behind the counter, looked up from his invoices, his face registering surprise rather than warmth. "Didn't expect you today," he remarked, his voice flat, carrying the weight of our unspoken estrangement. With a casual shrug, I mumbled, "Just thought I'd pop in and say hi." The air was heavy, saturated with the scent of motor oil and an unspoken chasm between us. My gaze wandered to the back wall where the founder's plaque we had proudly installed a decade ago now stood. I had designed it with such care, envisioning our names etched in history beside our parents. Yet there it was, the gold strip beneath Founders, now bearing only 3 names. Mine had vanished. I moved closer, feigning interest in its polish. Was it recently updated? He didn't even glance up. Callista's been stepping up more lately. She's earned it, he said with a nonchalant shrug. My heart clenched as I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste iron. So erasing someone's legacy now counts as a promotion? Is that what family has become? I nodded, the words, "You moved out. You're doing your own thing," echoing hollowly. My own thing. Paying their mortgage, managing logistics across 5 states, all without the slightest acknowledgement. Swallowing the bitterness I left before my words could carve wounds too deep to heal. That evening, back at my solitary kitchen table, I opened the Dallas County Clerk's online portal. With a few clicks, I navigated to the deed history of my parents' address. There it was stark on the screen. 3 months ago, the house had been quietly transferred to Callista Bundy. No joint owner, no trust, just a silent, swift change. And then another document. The transfer of our father's share in the family warehouse lot, also to Callista. No fanfare, no family meeting. So that's why the lawyer had called. Legally, he was obligated to notify anyone previously listed in a trust before such changes could be finalized. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd tried to erase me. I stepped outside, the estate document crumpled in my grip. The sky blushed pink as the sun sank behind the neighbor's chimney. Sitting on the curb by the mailbox, I stared at my name on the letter, the weight of betrayal settling like a stone in my chest. In the quiet solitude of my bedroom, the words echoed through my mind once more, clear, formal, and undeniably valid. They had erased me from the papers, as if I were nothing more than an error to be corrected. They thought I wouldn't fight. I whispered to myself, the bitterness of betrayal lingering on my tongue. Then my phone vibrated with a jarring buzz, breaking the silence. It was Callista, her message slicing through me like a knife. Don't make this messy. You were never meant to have it anyway. That line wasn't merely harsh. It was the confirmation I needed, the spark that ignited a fierce determination within me. I stared at her message until the screen faded to black, not from shock, I had already weathered that storm, but from a colder, heavier emotion. Resignation entwined with an ironclad resolve. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in the dim light of my lamp, poring over the trust papers, her text, and my scribbled notes, and there in the quiet I made my decision. The following Sunday morning arrived bathed in the same radiant Texas sun that had once warmed my childhood dreams. Yet today its light seemed almost surgical, cutting through the facade of normalcy. I didn't bother with my usual rituals, no styling my hair, no spritz of perfume. The deviled eggs my mother always anticipated from me, they remained undone. Instead, I grabbed a store-bought pie and a bottle of the cheapest red wine I could find. No personal touch, no affection poured into the preparation, just enough to meet the silent expectation to bring something. As I pulled up to their home, their driveway was already bustling with the familiar pastel cardigans and floral blouses of church friends mingling near the entrance. Callista stood there, a vision of southern charm, with her perfectly curled hair and a dress that hugged her figure, her laughter a calculated melody to draw attention. I waited for a lull in the conversation before stepping forward. Callista turned, her smile as tight as her dress. "Oh, you made it," she remarked, her voice dripping with feigned warmth. I handed her the pie, my voice steady. "Store was out of your favorite, so I improvised." She accepted it with a manicured hand, her gaze quickly scanning my attire. Simple slacks and a navy blouse, unremarkable yet unassailable. Nothing to criticize, nothing to commend, just neutral. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken words and the weight of my silent battle. The aroma of garlic rolls and the delicate scent of rose air freshener greeted me as I entered the house, a familiar yet somehow distant embrace. My mother was orchestrating the kitchen activities, guiding a teenage stranger, likely a church volunteer, around the serving trays. Upon seeing me, her hands clasped together in a gesture of joy. "Oh, how wonderful it is to have both my girls together again," she exclaimed, her gaze lingering on Callista with a warmth that seemed to say, "Especially you who's been here through all the storms." I swallowed, not out of bitterness, but as if cataloging another piece of evidence in the dossier of my family dynamics. Lunch was an array of choices, a buffet style that invited us to serve ourselves. I took the smallest portion, intending to retreat to the quiet of the corner armchair, but Callista's voice, sweet as molasses, beckoned me. "We've saved you a place at the big table," she said, her tone inviting yet tinged with an unspoken challenge. "Just for today." My mother added, her voice a gentle echo. "You've always preferred the couch, though." I took my seat at the adult table, not out of any sense of belonging, but as a tactical move. The air was soon filled with the hum of small talk, retirement plans, choir rehearsals, and Callista's latest charity endeavor. Then, with a melodious clink of her glass, she rose, her presence commanding attention. "I just want to express my gratitude to everyone here for supporting my new venture," she announced, her smile radiant. "The Callista Grace Foundation for Women in Recovery." Applause erupted, camera flashes lit up the room, and my mother, moved to tears, dabbed at her eyes. "The startup funds came from the estate. Callista mentioned offhandedly, "My parents believe in what I'm doing, and I'm honored to carry the family legacy forward." My eyes were drawn to the wine glass in front of me, where red droplets clung to the rim like incriminating evidence. That money, some of it was mine, or so it was supposed to be. As lunch concluded, I found myself falling into old habits, gathering dishes with the mechanical precision of one on autopilot. Forks were collected, plates stacked, but as I reached for the last glass, my father appeared at my side. "Don't worry about it," he said, his voice carrying a tone of finality. "Callista's got it now." Like I was an obsolete tool no longer necessary in the well-oiled machine of our family. Response. My heart pounded as I stepped into the cool embrace of the hallway, my mind racing with the sting of betrayal. The echo of my footsteps was the only sound accompanying my thoughts. "Of course she does," I murmured to myself, the words barely escaping my lips as I remembered the intern whose contract had ended so abruptly. Suddenly, Callista's presence was too close, her breath a whisper against my ear. "You're lucky I let you come today." She teased, her voice dripping with an insincere kindness that made my skin crawl. That was the tipping point. The air felt too thick, too heavy, with unspoken resentments. I needed to breathe, to find a space where I could unravel the knots in my chest. I excused myself, my steps quickening as I sought refuge in the guest bathroom, the very one I had painted 6 years ago during Mom's recovery. The scent of lavender sachets and pine sawdust still lingered, a bittersweet reminder of better times. I locked the door, my reflection in the mirror, a silent witness to my turmoil. The woman staring back wasn't old, but she was weary, her efforts so often overlooked, her sacrifices taken for granted. Flashes of the past assaulted me. The sale of my beloved vintage camera collection to fund Callista's DUI attorney, the Christmas I missed in Maui, because Dad needed new tires, and the day Mom wept tears of joy when I handed her the keys to a used Toyota, only for her to later claim at church that it was Callista's doing. My hand reached into the cabinet for tissue and stumbled upon a thick envelope nestled among old coupons and expired Tylenol. My stomach churned as I pulled it out. The invitation was luxurious cream cardstock with gold edges announcing a founder's dinner in honor of Callista Grace Bundy, the supposed sole legacy bearer of our family's vision. The date was next month. They were celebrating her using family funds to toast to her for usurping what I had painstakingly built. Sitting on the toilet lid, I read it again, the words blurring as my emotions swelled. They weren't even subtle anymore. I flushed the toilet, the sound echoing my inner turmoil, and washed my hands with deliberate slowness, as if to cleanse away the betrayal. Opening the door, I found Callista in the hallway, her voice a melodic distraction as she discussed trivialities with another guest. I walked past her, my voice a mere whisper, carrying the weight of my heartbreak. "I hope you enjoy the last meal where no one questions your lies." I didn't need a reaction. The urge to scream or cry was absent. Yet I knew I was poised to alter the course of everything, one document at a time. When the next morning arrived without the nudge of an alarm, I was already wide awake. Sleep had eluded me, but instead of exhaustion, I was enveloped in a sharp, unyielding focus, a clarity that comes when all is on the brink of loss. I declared a personal day at work, informing my supervisor with a mere mention of family affairs needing attention. No further explanation was necessary. After a swift coffee and a reassuring check to confirm the documents were safely nestled in my tote, I set out for downtown. The drive to the county courthouse was enveloped in silence, save for the rhythmic hum of the road and the echoing beat of my heart. The courthouse, with its imposing columns and echoing halls, awaited. The line at the records office was blessedly short. My hand trembled slightly as I filled out the form for public property records, feeling the sweat begin to gather under my shirt as I penned my name. Handing it over with a smile that belied my inner turmoil, I took my seat to wait. 10 minutes felt like an eternity, but then a clerk's voice broke the silence, calling me forward. Across the counter slid a folder, its contents the recent deeds and legal filings of our family properties, including the cherished lake house at Cedar Ridge. Oh, that house, a dream, woven by my grandfather's hands, a sanctuary from the sweltering Texas summers and familial strife. I had always harbored a belief that if healing were to find us, it would be by that tranquil lake. But the document before me told a different tale. A quit claim deed only 3 months old bore Callista's name, alone transferring the title to her, signed, notarized, and stamped. It seemed legitimate at first glance, but then, there it was right before my eyes, the signature line. Ronald C. Bundy. Yet something was amiss. The loops were slightly askew, the slant awkwardly wrong. It was almost his handwriting, but not quite. No need for a handwriting expert to confirm what my heart already knew. I had seen that signature once before, years ago, on a field trip release form when Dad was away in Houston for work. Mom had signed it muttering, he'd say yes anyway. Back then I dismissed it as harmless. Now doubts crept in like shadows at dusk. With a sense of surreal calm, I printed 2 copies of the document, placed them delicately in my folder, and exited the building. No rush, no texts sent in haste. Instead, I reached out to Mr. Leadbetter, our family's former estate attorney, who had retired 2 years prior but still maintained a home office on McKinn Avenue. Upon sharing my discovery, his voice held a note of hesitation, yet he agreed to meet me that very afternoon. Stepping into his sunlit study, I was transported back to my childhood, a young hand clasped in my father's during a will update. Mr. Leadbetter's presence was as commanding as ever, firm, quiet, trustworthy. He listened intently, not interrupting, as I presented the documents. Then with a careful hand, he lifted the deed, adjusted his glasses, and his brow furrowed. "This signature, it's off," he murmured, echoing my own suspicions. "I think it was forged by my mother." I confessed, watching for any sign of surprise. None came. "I've seen this before," he said slowly. "But what makes this intriguing is that your father set up a contingency trust in your name a decade ago. A trust. What was that?" He explained. "A trust that activates if he's declared incapacitated or if there's credible evidence of financial manipulation?" The implications hung heavy in the air. Would that override the current will? I ventured my voice, barely a whisper, as the room seemed to hold its breath. "Upon meeting the trigger conditions, yes," he confirmed, "you could effectively reclaim legal control over a significant portion of the estate." I departed from his home, my hands feeling as if they belonged to another, trembling yet resolute. No tears fell, no cheers erupted. Instead, I reached out to a mobile notary and a handwriting analyst. I wasn't ready for the courtroom's glare, but I was determined to be prepared. I wanted the truth to be not just known, but documented, verified, and shielded like armor against the coming storm. Back at my sanctuary, I meticulously scanned each document into a secured cloud folder, christening it the Minder Bundy Archive. The very act of naming it sent a wave of nausea through me. That evening, while pouring myself a cup of tea, my phone vibrated with an unknown caller. I let it go to voicemail, and soon the transcript appeared. "Whatever you're digging into, stop. You're not thinking clearly. You don't want to destroy this family." I played the message. My mother's voice, soft and measured, lulled like a lullaby dipped in poison. She was right about one thing: I didn't want to destroy the family. I just wanted them to stop tearing me apart. By Friday afternoon, I had gathered all the pieces of the puzzle, yet lacked the will to face them again. The handwriting analyst's report arrived, digitally confirming, in clinical, emotionless terms, the signature on the quit claim deed exhibits significant deviations and is highly unlikely to have been written by the same individual who signed prior documents under Ronald C. Bundy. It was the confirmation of my darkest fears, yet the very evidence I needed. I saved the file to my encrypted folder alongside scanned copies of the original trust and the revised document that had erased my name. I named the folder Inheritance Integrity. It sounded like a corporate security measure, perhaps, because I felt like I was preparing for a battle, not just a legal dispute. I knew the challenge I faced was more than just a familial disagreement. It was a meticulously orchestrated and calculated ordeal. That evening I attempted to cook, but the pan smoked as my appetite vanished, replaced by an insatiable restlessness that sleep could not soothe. The day drifted by in a haze. Saturday was lost to the routine of grocery shopping, laundry, and obsessively vacuuming the same patch of rug. My mind refused to think, but my body sensed I was bracing for an imminent confrontation. Then on Sunday morning, the message arrived, a text from Callista. "Mom wants brunch at Stone Cafe. Neutral ground. We should all just talk. Don't wear drama." I stared at the message, pondering its implications, then replied, "I'll be there." But my intention was not to reconcile. I was there to gauge the chasm between the person they believed I was and the individual I had evolved into. Stone Cafe in Plano with its glass walls and harsh industrial lighting was not my scene. It was a place for those who wished to be noticed, serving overpriced croissants and underseasoned eggs. As I entered, I saw them already seated. Mom, adorned in one of her coral blazers, looked as if she had an announcement to make. Callista rose to greet me, her arms outstretched as if we were long-lost friends. "Evie," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of warmth and pretense, and kissed the air near my cheek. "Glad you came." I managed a half smile and took my seat. The server offered mimosas, which I politely declined. The conversation began with trivialities, talk of the weather church events and a neighbor's new fence. Callista, ever the conductor of our interactions, steered the dialogue with confidence, using scripture to justify points about forgiveness and casually mentioning her recent involvement in a charity gala. Then, with a gentle touch on my wrist, Mom leaned in her eyes, searching mine, and whispered, "You'll understand someday, Evie. We didn't want you burdened with property matters. You've always been more sensitive." That word sensitive echoed in my mind, a reminder of how they perceived me. Sensitive. Oh, it wasn't merely a label. It was a subtle dismissal, a maternal pat on the head meant to sideline me. My ears burned with a rising heat, yet I would not unravel here, not for their sake. With deliberate care, I pressed my napkin to my lips and laid it down on the table. "I may be sensitive," I murmured, my voice a soft yet firm whisper, "but I am neither blind nor small. Not anymore." Their smiles faltered, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Rising from my seat, I extracted my wallet, placing a crisp $20 bill beside my uneaten omelet. Callista's eyes flickered with surprise. "Evie, come on," she pleaded. "Don't be dramatic." I did not meet her gaze. "Drama requires a performance, and I am done feigning that this isn't real." I declared, my steps measured and deliberate as I turned to leave. This was an exit where silence screamed louder than any slammed door could. Yet she couldn't resist the urge to call out, "You're overreacting. No one's trying to take anything from you." At the hostess stand, I paused, glancing back with a wry twist of my lips. "Funny," I retorted. "That's precisely what the paperwork says." Stepping outside, the air was crisp, honest, slicing through the fog of pretense. I didn't weep, didn't tremble. I walked with purpose. I wasn't closing a chapter. I was crafting one on my own terms. The glass door of the clerk's office thudded shut behind me, severing the cacophony of city life. In the stark hallway, I stood clutching the manila envelope, not meant for today, yet here it was, filled with my questions, perhaps holding the answers I sought. I approached the records window, gave my name, and requested copies of property transfers under my family's names over the last 5 years. I braced for resistance, but the clerk barely glanced up. "Go to workstation 3, she instructed, her voice as mundane as the task itself. I secured the visitor badge with a nod of gratitude, my fingers brushing against the cool plastic as I made my way to the monitor. With a swift login, my fingers danced across the keyboard, summoning the digital deed with surprising ease. There it was, a lakeside property, once Ronald C. Bundy's, now transferred to Callista L. Bundy, sealed with a smiley-faced notary stamp that felt almost mocking in its cheerfulness. But a detail sharp as a thorn snagged my attention: the date. The deed was notarized the very weekend Dad suffered a mild stroke, a time when I was by his side, guiding him through the sterile halls of the hospital, enduring the endless wait in the CT scan room, with only a stale coffee for company and a blanket he playfully called too pink. There was simply no way he could have signed anything then. A chill ran through me as I noticed another detail: the name of the notary service. Texas Signed Notary Remote Division. I copied the registry number, my heart pounding, and cross-checked it online. The notary was registered to Monica Varel, Callista's college roommate. I felt no rage, not the kind that burns in blisters, but rather a cold, creeping dread. This wasn't mere manipulation. It was outright fraud. I printed out every piece of evidence: the backdated filing, the registry information, the full deed. As I stepped into the harsh light of day, a quiet voice whispered in my mind, "This isn't favoritism. This is theft." I drove straight home, the weight of the revelation heavy on my shoulders. Late afternoon light spilled across my desk as I sat down and unlocked the fireproof box tucked beneath my bed. Inside lay the old living trust document, a relic from simpler times when Dad had entrusted me with its safekeeping. I unfolded it, my heart in my throat. In the event of parental retirement or death, it declared in crisp, formal script, all properties and assets are to pass to Ivana K. Stroud, sole daughter and legal heir. My breath hitched, my eyes wide as I absorbed the gravity of what I held in my hands. Could it be that all this time the truth had been right here waiting to be acknowledged? Had shifted like the tectonic plates beneath a quiet sea ready to erupt? I hadn't imagined it. Beneath the sentence, there it was, his signature, Dad's true mark, not the sterile formal script on the lakeside deed. This was the sweeping R, the meticulous C, the quirky loop and the B of Bundy, which he always said resembled a 6. I gazed at it not with skepticism, but with an overwhelming wave of sorrow. It was as if his voice echoed once more like that evening, when I was 16, sitting on the back porch, tears streaming down my face because I didn't get into my dream college. And he whispered, "One day everything will be yours. Not because you asked for it, but because you've earned it." How could I have forgotten the weight of that promise until this moment? I placed the old trust document beside the forged deed and opened a new folder on my computer. This time I labeled it Active Case Stroud. Into it, I meticulously dropped every piece of evidence: the original trust, the falsified quitclaim deed, Monica Varel's registry record screenshots of text messages from Callista bank statements showing the mortgage payments I'd shouldered, and the voice recordings I had secretly saved of my mom discussing Callista's supposed sacrifices. Then I added one final item, a draft letter poised but unsigned addressed to our family's estate attorney. I wasn't ready to send it. I needed more support before I could swing that door wide open. That night, as I sipped my water and watched the sky turn a deeper shade of blue, my phone vibrated. A voicemail from Mom. I pressed play, bracing myself. "Evie, please don't make a big deal out of this. We've all moved on. Just be grateful Callista's willing to manage things." Her voice dripped with that syrupy southern charm she always used to try and coax me back into compliance. But something within me had shifted. Could I let this go? I stood motionless, rooted to the spot, solid as a statue. "No," I whispered to the empty room, gently placing my phone face down on the table. "Not this time." My fingers, trembling slightly, reached for my email. It had been years since I'd last contacted Norelle Nix, not since our days together on the Veterans Housing Project. Yet her fierce determination and unyielding spirit remained vivid in my memory. How she once made a county clerk reverse a decision with a single commanding phone call. With purpose, I typed into the subject line, "Client name Ivana Stroud, inquiry into breach of trust and property fraud." And with a decisive click, I sent it into the digital ether. The night stretched long as I prepared, not merely gathering documents, but fortifying my spirit. My black folder lay open on the kitchen table, its contents meticulously arranged like the arsenal for an unspoken battle. I did not pace, nor did I shed tears. Instead, I reviewed, read, and reread each document. Then with precision, I packed them away, zipped up my case, and pressed my blouse until every crease was banished, mirroring the unwavering resolve within me. By noon, I found myself driving up to the house that once was mine. The magnolia tree still leaned slightly to the left, as if bowing in a silent acknowledgement to the sidewalk. I noticed the wind chime my mother adored had been replaced. This new one, crafted from glass rather than copper, rang out cleaner, sharper notes. It was as if they had chosen to start anew without me. I parked with deliberate slowness, no honk, no haste. My steps across the driveway were measured, my heels striking the cement with firm purpose. When I rang the bell, it was Callista who answered, her smile already triumphant, as if she were the victor in this silent war. She was clad in white, not cream or beige, but stark white, like this was her day of coronation. "Glad you could make it," she said with saccharine sweetness, stepping aside to let me in. "We're all waiting in the living room." I said nothing, my silence speaking volumes as I stepped inside, my heart a tempest beneath my calm exterior. The room felt like the stage of an ancient tribunal where justice hung in the balance. There sat Dad, ensconced in his familiar recliner, his arms folded as if this were just another petty squabble he'd have to mediate. And Mom on the edge of the couch, her hands delicately clasped as though she were about to discuss the latest novel at a book club, not orchestrating a betrayal. Between them on the coffee table rested a folder that did not belong to me. As I settled into my seat, Callista's hand darted out, retrieving the folder with a flourish. "This," she declared with an air of finality, is merely a formality, the last draft of our division agreement. It's been vetted by an impartial mediator. I raised my hand to pause her unzipping my case with a deliberate calm and began to lay out my own documents on the glass table. 1, 2, 3, each placed with quiet precision. Callista's mouth twitched a slight betrayal of her composure. Here, I began, my voice steady, is the original living trust signed by both parents 5 years ago. The room fell into a heavy silence. Mom shifted uncomfortably and Dad, he seemed to shrink before my eyes, looking older, somehow diminished. And this, I continued sliding over a highlighted document, is the notarized property deed transfer from last month. The notary, I slid a printout towards Callista. Registered to Monica Viral. I believe you recall her, Callista. The silence was deafening. Finally, I placed the last sheet on the table. And this letter from my attorney confirms that each of these transactions, every single one, can be contested. Fraud, particularly with forged signatures, can lead to both civil and criminal repercussions. Callista's eyes narrowed, her voice laced with scorn. You're bluffing, she scoffed, tossing her hair back dismissively. You're vindictive, Evie. Always have been. You ran off to college and returned thinking you were superior to us. I tilted my head slightly, my voice low but cutting through the tension. I came back because no one else was willing to remind you that I didn't need your permission to exist. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the truth that had been overlooked for too long. As she gasped, it wasn't in shock but fear that seized her heart. She clutched her father's hand, seeking solace in his touch, but found no return of pressure. You never said you didn't want the estate, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. You were always so sensitive. We thought Callista could manage things more quietly, more compliantly. The room fell into a heavy silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Just then the phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet like a knife. I clicked the speaker button, and the voice of attorney Norell Nix flowed into the room as serene as a winter lake. This is attorney Norell Nix. If we don't have confirmation of mutual resolution by Monday at 9:00 a.m., we will proceed with a formal petition for an injunction and review of all assets in question. I trust that's clear. No one responded. The silence was deafening. I stood, my palms dry, my knees steady. I had rehearsed this moment, every step etched in my mind, but now I needed no pretense. As I turned to leave, my gaze snagged on something on the shelf behind me, a photo frame from that old family trip to San Antonio. The photo displayed only 3 figures, Mom, Dad, and Callista. Yet I remembered that day vividly. I was there. I had set up the camera on a cooler, scampered into place, and captured that moment. I reached for the frame, my fingers trembling slightly as I opened it. Behind the doctored image, the real photo lay folded and concealed. There I was, right between them, grinning, my arm wrapped around Dad's shoulder, the sun glaring in my eyes. They hadn't completely erased me, just attempted. I refolded the picture with care, tucking it into my bag. What they tried to bury had in silence preserved the truth. And as I walked out, the only sound was the sharp tap of my heels on the hardwood floor. No voices, no protests, no more lies. The morning air outside the courthouse was eerily still, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the next chapter in this poignant saga to unfold. Inside the courtroom, the air itself seemed to hold its breath, a palpable tension enveloping the room as I stepped onto the stone steps. The glass doors mirrored the tempest of emotions swirling within me, a storm I could scarcely contain. With a folder tucked securely under my arm, I took a deep, steadying breath, the kind that fills your lungs with resolve, and I walked in. The courtroom didn't boast the grandeur of polished mahogany or golden seals as seen in films. Instead, it was a space of beige and blandness, almost clinical. Yet for me, it was no less than a battlefield, each step echoing with the weight of my purpose. My parents, adorned in colors as muted as their expressions, sat attempting to convey innocence and confusion. Meanwhile, Callista, ever the corporate titan, wore a tailored gray blazer, her usual smirk absent today, replaced by a solemnity that spoke volumes of the gravity of our gathering. I settled beside Norrell, whose nod was brief, but loaded with unspoken support, her focus unwavering from the meticulously prepared filings before her. Each of her words was like a scalpel, precise and calculated, designed to cut through deception and reveal the truth beneath. The bailiff's voice cut through the silence, calling the session to order. The atmosphere shifted as the judge entered, his presence alone commanding respect. Even Callista's posture stiffened, her smile nowhere to be seen. After the formalities, the judge turned to Narelle. You may proceed with your opening summary. With no preamble, Narelle stood and played the audio recording. My heart thudded, a slow drum beat resonating in my chest. The sound, though slightly muffled, was unmistakable through the courtroom speakers. Callista's laughter, my mother's chiming in, and my father's quieter but no less damning voice. Manipulated the dumb youngest one. Callista's voice echoed, slicing through the silence. She won't check. She just wants to be loved. The silence that followed was suffocating, a heavy cloak that wrapped around your throat. Could you hear the collective gasp, the shock in the room? The judge leaned forward, his face a mask of seriousness. This recording has been verified. Yes, Your Honor. Narelle confirmed, her voice steady. Time-stamped, authenticated, and obtained legally by a third party who was present in the household at the time. As the courtroom's tension thickened, Callista leaped to her feet. That's taken out of context, she exclaimed. The judge, with a stern gaze, commanded, Sit down, Miss Stroud. This court does not tolerate grandstanding. I avoided looking at her. There was no need. The clip wasn't merely a revelation. It was the confirmation of every fear, every suspicion I had silently borne. It was real, and now it had been heard by all. My parents, stoic as statues, didn't even glance in my direction. Their indifference stung more than any words they had uttered, but the ordeal was far from over. With a deep breath, I opened my folder and extracted a single crucial page. This, I announced, rising to address the room with a newfound resolve, is the part they forgot. Narelle handed it to the clerk, who then passed it to the judge. It's a clause written into the original family trust. I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside, signed by my grandfather before he passed. It grants me full veto power over any family asset transfer made before I turn 35. And when is your 35th birthday? The judge inquired, scanning the document. 2 days from now, I replied. The judge peered over his glasses, his gaze piercing. Then as of the day after tomorrow, the contested assets cannot be transferred without your express consent. I heard Callista's sharp intake of breath. She spun towards our parents. You knew about this, she hissed. Did either of you even read it? My mother's face turned ashen, while my father rubbed his forehead, perhaps wishing he could erase the room from existence. But I had more to reveal. From the depths of my coat pocket, I retrieved something fragile yet sacred. A tiny origami crane, faded and worn at the wings. My grandfather had taught me how to fold it on a quiet Sunday in his garage. He then placed it into his wallet, saying, You're the one with wings. Remember that. It was returned to me after his funeral, a symbol of his belief in me, his legacy now clutched in my hand, as I faced the courtroom, ready to claim my rightful place. As the claws of the envelope folded around the letter, I set it down upon the table, a symbol of the journey it had endured through years of silence and the labyrinthine paper trails. And now at last it had found its resting place, its purpose fulfilled. The courtroom fell into a reverent hush as the judge delivered the interim ruling. With immediate effect, a freeze was imposed upon all transferred estate assets. Probate records once closed would be pried open for scrutiny. An official inquiry into the potential misuse of family funds was now sanctioned. Callista, overwhelmed, sank into her chair. My mother, perhaps poised to plead or perhaps to manipulate, began to speak, but the judge, with a decisive gesture, silenced her. You've had your say, he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. As I turned to depart, I passed by my parents. My father averted his gaze and my mother whispered, Evie, please. I paused, not out of hesitation, but to make a point. This isn't about revenge. I stated, my voice steady, yet infused with a tremor of emotion, not turning to meet their eyes. It's about restoration. With those words, I walked away, not in haste, but with purpose, unburdened by the weight I had carried for so long. The crunch of gravel under my tires as I approached the driveway of what was once my grandfather's house, now solely mine, was not a sound of victory, but one of peace. I wasn't here to revel in triumph. I was here to breathe. From the outside, the house appeared largely unchanged, save for a fresh coat of paint and neatly trimmed hedges. Inside, however, the air was thick with stillness, not emptiness, but with memories that seemed to whisper, have you truly healed, or have you merely learned to bear the pain with grace? I let myself in, the door closing with a gentle thud. The quiet was broken only by the soft creak of the wooden floor as I moved through the house. The scent of cedar, faint and warm, enveloped me like a cherished memory of an embrace. I placed my keys on the entry table, a simple act that felt profoundly significant, marking my new beginning in this place that was now truly home. In the quiet corners of the house, I traced my fingers along the ancient wooden shelves where my grandfather's black-bound ledgers and gardening magazines once stood sentinel. Each room whispered tales of a man whose presence was gentle yet indelible, leaving imprints so profound they echoed through the years. This space, unlike my own family, remembered me holding on to the essence of those who once filled its walls with life. I ventured into the kitchen now, bathed in light, transformed yet familiar. Marble countertops gleamed, cabinets shone with a new coat of paint, but there above the sink was the same window where he'd hum softly while washing the earth from freshly picked tomatoes. Standing there, I let the morning sun kiss my face, and a subtle shift occurred within me. Not a final chapter, but a moment of serene tranquility. In that tranquility, I found peace. The sharp rap at the door pulled me from my reverie. I returned to find Mrs. Alden, our neighbor from down the street, her scarf fluttering slightly in the breeze, an old worn envelope in her hand. "I found this in the old church's mailbox slot," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of time. "It's addressed to you." "It looks ancient," I remarked, my heart quickening as my fingers recognized the familiar script. "It's from my grandfather." Back inside, I settled into the living room's time-worn armchair, its familiar creak a comforting echo of the past. With a gentle tear, I opened the envelope, and his words, penned just 5 days before his departure, flowed across the page, a soft touch on my soul. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, the winds have surely shifted. Fear often clouds fairness. But I've always known your heart, which is why I chose you. You are one to protect, not to possess. Speak gently, but stand firm when it counts. Justice, though slow, always finds its mark. Love always, Papa." I carefully refolded the letter, preserving the poignant moment, as if sealing a whisper of love and legacy into the fabric of the house. The sensation was akin to a cherished memento settling into my chest. A soft sigh escaped my lips, not one of relief, but rather of release. My phone vibrated with a message of voicemail from my mother. I didn't hasten to listen. Instead, I watched the screen glow and pulse. Curiosity, that insatiable beast, eventually coaxed me to press play. Her voice, a touch softer than I remembered, whispered through the speaker. "Evie, we didn't realize how much you meant to us until you walked away. Perhaps we didn't want to face it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you're finding your peace." My eyes remained dry, my breath long and hollow. The anger had faded, but the door to reconciliation remained firmly shut. Some closures require no dramatic slams. They simply are. Later in the quiet of the afternoon, I ascended the stairs to what was once his study. I had transformed it into a sanctuary of sorts, a reading room draped in white curtains, its shelves laden with books he would have adored. On the mantel, I set a delicate folded crane, not merely paper, but a symbol of the part of me they tried to erase. The child who once folded hope into the corners of her life, who stayed silent, thinking love was a prize to be won. She resided here now, proud and complete. I didn't seek to rebuild bridges, yet I hadn't destroyed them either. Outside, the laughter of children playing drifted in as they raced past the gate. One girl, perhaps 10, chased after a paper bird, twirling in the gentle breeze. I smiled, realizing I no longer chased approval from those who had looked through me for years. They had relinquished the estate, assuming I was dispensable. But I had always been the foundation, the quiet strength, the keeper of what truly mattered, and what was merely noise to be silenced. I stepped outside, locked the door, and paused. What now? The sun kissed my face that morning, a gentle reminder of the life awaiting me beyond the threshold. No farewells, no grand declarations, just the quiet promise of a new beginning. Sometimes you don't need to make a scene. The act of not returning speaks volumes. Standing up for oneself isn't always about raising your voice. Sometimes it's about walking away with your dignity intact. This tale wasn't spun from threads of vengeance, but from the fabric of self-worth reclaimed after years of being overlooked. Remember, family isn't solely about shared blood. It's about mutual respect. Have you ever had to choose yourself even when it hurt? If narratives like this resonate with you, please hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt stories that touch the soul. And do share your thoughts below. Your voice matters to us. Thank you for watching, for your support, and for being part of this journey. Like, share, and subscribe to never miss out on the stories that matter.